Well, good evening and welcome everybody to the Hive Buddy Bee Club. Good to be here with you, Carmel.
It's great to be here too. How are you tonight?
I'm doing pretty well. Bit of a chuckle with you there in the warm up to the event, so I'm feeling like there's some humour to be had tonight as usual.
It could be, yes.
oh,
Well,
as,
you've got to balance it out the serious stuff with a bit of humour, don't you?
this is true. This is true. Well, those that haven't been along to our sessions before, just to give you a little bit of an idea, there'll be some news that's popped up over the last month or so, or that's been topical around the socials or on news channels that we like to talk about or just briefly mention. We normally look at some seasonal aspects of what's happening in our bees, of which there's some really interesting things happening given there's a change of season. And we normally like to dive in a little bit deeper with a particular topic, which does come back to the seasonal stuff. So Carmel's got that for you a little bit later. And then I normally trawl the interwebs and try to find some things of interest, of quirkiness, of something different. And I've only got a very short one of those at the end of the night for you, Carmel, but I feel like you're going to love it. Does that sound all right?
Sounds good to me. Yep. I'm ready to
well,
rock and roll.
you beauty. Well, those that were here last month rather, you'll recall we just did a bit of a Varroa update. I know Carmel's going to do that in a moment. We talked about our wonderful young youth beekeepers from Tasmania who were over in Slovenia representing Australia and doing a wonderful job there. We were talking a lot about propolis, and there's a little bit more comes up about propolis tonight in something I've got to share with you later, Carmel. And you introduced your amazing list, that is your toolkit, your beekeeping
Yes.
toolkit, and went through that. And if anyone missed that, you need to go back and check that recording on the Hive Buddy community YouTube channel and see that list because it was extensive and amazing to listen to. We talked about Icelandic beekeeping, that's a thing. We talked about mad honey, and it was a good session. So that's there for people to go back and check it out.
Yep.
Look, though, without our sponsors, the show wouldn't go ahead. Tonight's show is brought to you by the Hive Buddy Bee Clubs Online, which is really out there for those people managing and looking after bee clubs. So if you're tired of juggling those responsibilities of managing a bee club and maintaining some sort of online presence for your club, well, look no further, Carmel. Hive Buddy is here to make your life a little bit sweeter, and there's an easy step-by-step process to get set up. Have your club enabled online, and a really simple place there to host your bee club. It doesn't have to mean you're an online bee club like this. It just is a simple place for you to get organised and manage your bee club. So people that resonate, they'll go on. You're going to say something?
Yeah, I would think it would be a great complementary thing because, as you know, I am the president of Werribee, but to have an online presence and to be able to record meetings and have a place to be able to put them for people that can't make it. And I think bee clubs and the Hive Buddy community can both complement each other.
And that's the idea, a great place to exist together. Anyway, if you want to learn more, hivebuddy.com.au is where people can do that. But Carmel, I'm dying to know what's caught your attention lately.
Well, I think the biggest news, which I'm sure everyone watching knows about, is the Varroa update, is that it's now on the border of Victoria because of all the almond pollination that's been going on. So that's had a lot of us here in Victoria on the edge of our seats wondering what's going to happen.
Sure.
Apparently it was a self reported discovery. Yep. So it's good to know that beekeepers are being responsible and they are checking, and there's a pretty good permit system in place, I believe. So but what they did immediately was, obviously New South Wales have the system in place where they put in the 5 kilometre and then I think 25 kilometre.
10 and 25, that's right.
10 and 20, is it right? 10 and 25, yes. So there's the red zone and the purple zone, and the red zone is basically, sorry guys, and then there's a purple zone. And that extended into Victoria. So now Agriculture Victoria has come on board, and we have now our own mapping system. So if anyone wants to look at that, we can go to agvic .vic.gov. Oh, where is it? Let me go.
Yeah, that sounds
I put
something
the
like
link
that.
up straight away. Let me go to that right now, and I'll put it in the chat. So
Oh, yeah,
if
good
anyone
work.
wants to have a look at that later. So there were lots of questions back and forth, and obviously heaps of chatter on
Yep.
the, social groups and that sort of thing.
Hadn't noticed.
What they've decided to do is bring in an extra step to the monitoring system, which will allow the beekeepers in the purple zone to move their hives out of that area. And the reason why there's such an this is critical at the moment, because almond pollination's finished, so all the flowers are now falling off the trees.
Of course.
So when that, and almond trees have fantastic pollen, but stuff all nectar. So
Sure.
if
So
the bees have
yeah.
used up the nectar that they had on board, and now the flowers are falling off, so now pollen is also decreasing, the bees start looking for more food, and they
Yep.
start robbing each other, which increases the chance of more spread of any pests and diseases.
Yep.
Plus, they're going to be missing out on food. So the strength of the hives and the food supply, it's critical that something needs to happen. And they've got canola and there's other, pollination spots that these hives need to go to. So what they've never done this before. And this is where this whole situation is an unfolding story, to
Sure
having
is.
meetings and making decisions and having, and it's like they're responding to things as they unfold. So they've decided that the hives in the purple zone can be moved out, but these beekeepers are going to have to be doing extra Varroa alcohol washes.
Yep.
And they will be very closely monitored to make sure that they don't keep spreading. So
Yes.
we have two areas that are up on the Murray, right
Yep.
there on the coast. One of them means the red zone has come into the Victorian side.
Yep.
So New South Wales and AgVic will be working very closely together as this all unfolds. So I'll put the New South Wales link up for you guys as well. And
Sounds like it's a busy period up there, but we don't need tens of thousands of starving bees.
No, we
It's got to be carefully managed. And whilst I know there's a lot of frustration about the thought of moving bees around still, well, it's that or they all die anyway. And if it's done sensibly and carefully, which is the key, sensibly and carefully, then it can be managed. Here's hoping.
Here's hoping. Yes. Here's hoping. Fingers
Yeah.
crossed. Yep. Let's see what unfolds next.
Yeah, well, that's it. Have you got any other news or info that you've uncovered for us?
That's about me I thought I just, the Varroa was pretty big news, but, as that first there was the announcement that it had arrived on our borders.
Yes.
It's not in Victoria yet, though.
No, I remember hearing that.
We've now got zones there. And then the next news was that this was the next step, was to allow beekeepers, because really, when they're that close to each other, you want to get the ones in the purple zone in Victoria, you want them moved away as well.
Yeah, of course.
So that was the next. So I just thought I'd share that. But what have you got in the news? What have you heard?
Well, I've heard a few good ones actually. So there's a few things which go on that Varroa topic, and they've bounced around the socials a little bit. So people listening may have come across them, but there's a few articles that I wanted to talk about that are topical now, even though they were written earlier in the year. The first one here is from Extension Oz. It's extensionoz.com.au if you wanted to check it out. I'll post a link in Hive Buddy later. It's does Australia have Varroa mite predators? And so this whole idea is like it's pretty interesting that we've never had that here. It's thought that maybe just, and I remember having a conversation with some bee scientists a couple of years ago. There's potential that we've got the answer to solving Varroa somewhere in our country. We just won't know it yet. But it's these sort of articles that make you go, oh, they might be actually right. So back in November of last year, there was this article published, and it talks about what opportunities there are in managing Varroa naturally in Australia. And they've thought about different predators, and one candidate is a pseudoscorpion, and this is exactly how you say it, Carmel. I don't want you to doubt me at all. A pseudoscorpion called Chilifer cancroides. I don't know.
It sounds like something you do eat. Chiliper cancroides.
Yeah, I probably butchered it.
Is that a Mexican dish?
Oh, it does sound that way, doesn't it? Anyway, Ron from the New Zealand is a New Zealand bioprotection researcher and experienced beekeeper. He's probably hating me right now for the way I've worded that. But he's gone and figured out that in New Zealand, these pseudoscorpions, they're not interested in the bees or their young, so they don't go and snoop around the bees and cause problems there. In fact, the bees completely tolerate their presence, these little pseudoscorpions.
A pseudoscorpion, is it like related to a scorpion?
Well, I don't know if it's related to a scorpion, but it's got a visual similarity to a scorpion.
Does it have like the tail and the stinger and stuff?
Well, they're not quite. So they've got quite a large body, and they've got two, and you might have seen them in and around your house or when you've done some gardening or what have you. They're only tiny, but they have what looks like two big claws, and I'm sure that's not what they are, but that's what they sort of look like. I don't know if they're claws or something else.
Yeah, so like crab pincers, yeah.
A little bit, but I don't see an opening bit. I just see it's just a closed end. Yeah. Anyway, apparently they feed off Varroa.
Ooh.
And the only thing is these particular pseudoscorpions, and I'm going to try and say that word as much as I can tonight. Pseudoscorpions, because I love it. They're not found on the mainland of Australia. They're found in Tasmania, but the truth is we just don't simply know enough about what's going on with them here. So I've got $2 million ideas for you tonight, Carmel.
Yep.
My first one. Oh yeah, probably more.
$2 million or 2 by $1 million ideas?
2 by 1. So the first one is go and start breeding pseudoscorpions and trialing them out in your beehive. See if you can get that one up and running. And then you're the distributor of pseudoscorpions. So there's idea number 1. I'll share idea number 2.
Well, it'd be better than chemicals, wouldn't it?
Well, here's the thing. But you know what? It makes me think maybe it's not pseudoscorpions. Maybe it's something else that we've got here on the mainland which will be advantageous. Simply don't know. There's a researcher over in Western Australia from the West Australian Museum. His name's Mark Harvey. And he is what I wish I was, a world expert in pseudoscorpions.
Oh.
And he's particularly interested in hearing from people who find pseudoscorpions near their hive or in their hives and wants people to take photos and send them to him. So I'll put this post up later. But if you go and have a look at these things and if you start seeing them around, I've definitely seen them. If I've lifted bits of wood that have been stacked together in the backyard, I've seen things similar.
Did you say we don't have them here in Australia?
Well, I think the very specific one that is beneficial.
Oh, the one that eats Varroa. Right.
That's the thing. But I don't know enough. I can't tell you I know everything about these things. I'm definitely not Mark, the world expert in pseudoscorpions. I just thought it was an interesting article. So that's the first one. And the second one, and I want you to see if you can pick the second $1 million idea in here. I was down at the cafe and I picked up a copy off the table of Entomology Today and started reading that. And inside there was this.
They have an Entomology Today at your local cafe. Okay.
If you want to believe that story, that's up to you. Anyway, earlier this year they had an article called Sunflowers Linked to Reduced Varroa Mite Infestations in Honeybees.
Oh,
and I thought, well, this is on parallel with the pseudoscorpion. Got to say it again. And so I was sort of having a good look, thinking, well, maybe, like I know that we don't like the idea of treatments. I know that, but it's going to become necessary to some degree. We also know that. But if we've got all these opportunities that might limit or reduce the need, then that's great. So like everyone's in a doom and gloom mode about this Varroa coming to Australia. Well, lighten up. We don't know what's going to happen. Yeah. Let's think about it. So anyway, there's this early evidence from this study that sunflowers may provide some value here to stop Varroa in a beehive. The sad thing is I can't sit here and tell you that they know exactly what the mechanism is yet. They haven't worked that out because they're looking at lots of things. Yeah. And they found out that, for whatever reason, don't know, sunflowers seem to have an influence. So it was quite interesting. So where is it here? The pollen, it says that the pollen and nectar of sunflowers is protein poor and not considered to be really great food for bees. Like, that's a known thing. But from an overall health perspective, whilst the nectar and pollen's not great, there is this influence that it has on parasites. So much so, how's this for a statistic? Those that were given supplemental sunflower pollen saw a 2.75-fold, we'll call it threefold diminishment in Varroa infestation levels.
Wow.
I'm rounding that up just for simplistic terms, but that's significant. Yeah. So versus normal artificial pollen patties, they were given sunflower pollen patties and they saw nearly a threefold diminishment in Varroa. Wow. And their models predict that each doubling of sunflower acreage around an apiary would lead to a 28% decrease in mite infestations. So they had really low levels of sunflowers around these areas, like they say here 0.32%, which is not much of an area, but maybe having some sunflowers in our ecosystem is going to be good for our bees with Varroa.
Isn't that interesting?
So what else is we going to find?
Wow, yeah.
I don't know.
Pseudo-scorpions and sunflowers.
You're playing along with me now. So did you pick up on my second $1 million idea?
I'm going to start sunflower farming now, right? And now there are different types of sunflowers. So which sunflowers were they testing?
Delighted you asked, because not only am I an expert in pseudoscorpions, I'm an expert in the family Asteraceae, which is the sunflower.
Asteraceae, okay.
I'm reading it straight off the thing. But there is a particular species that they were testing with, but it's the Asteraceae family more generally, which is lots and lots and lots of plants, to be honest. So let's see.
Well, there you go. Interesting.
I've got one other thing for you. I'll push on through. One other article, which was from this last week, so it's not regurgitated from earlier in the year. It's from the ABC News, and its title is "Canberra Researchers Studying Bee Stingers May Help Develop the Next Generation of Micro-Medical Devices."
I think I might have seen that one.
Yeah, so
their stingers are pretty intricate things, aren't they?
Well, when I'm being stung by a bee, I don't feel like they're very intricate. And nor do I think that they're very technical, but they're incredibly technical and involved. And this has proven it. So what do you think happens when a bioengineer and associate professor are inspecting a friend's backyard beehives and gets stung on the eye, just below the eye? Not only does it hurt, but he goes away thinking about the next opportunity, the next opportunity to come up with some biomedical device. So whilst it was a painful experience, he's thinking, how is this stinger so effective? So he's gone away and started to do a whole heap of research. And the University of New South Wales out of Canberra, they've done this 3D render of a bee stinger. Right. And they've learnt a whole lot when they've done that. Turn the page.
Yeah.
So next
what
time,
did they find out?
There's two harpoon-like lancets, which is their words, not mine, with all these backward-facing barbs, and that obviously means it goes in but doesn't like to come out. Now we know that, but there's all these other unique geometrics that lend them to being really perfect for piercing your skin and pumping you with toxins. So that's one thing, but then
there's two barbs, not one barb. There's actually two that goes down,
and they sort of seesaw from each other. There's a little bit of that. I probably don't know the right words to use to describe that well, but they think to themselves, well, when we're trying to apply different types, or we're trying to attach different medical devices to people, whether it's some sort of sticky adhesive, whether there's some other mechanism to hold it on there, well, what if we could use like these micro barbs, this technology that's similar to this? I mean, obviously you don't want the experience of a bee stinger, but this technology, this idea might lend to that. And maybe in the future you might see things like insulin pumps or targeted drug delivery using this sort of technology. I can imagine that.
Huh, interesting.
Don't you reckon? If it can happen on that level for bees,
Yeah.
Why can't our medical world harness that
Yeah.
for that purpose? That
Harness
sort of
some of
weather.
that engineering. Yeah.
So no, love
Interesting.
it. I'm loving it. I found that very exciting, and that's what I've been looking at this month. I'm sure there's loads of other things out there, but I would absolutely love to hear, Carmel, what's been happening in your apiaries.
In my apiary.
Yeah,
Well, I've started checks already.
sure.
Because the weather's been warm enough, and
It has been strange.
but interestingly, I went over to, so based in Victoria, I went over to Yarraville and Williamstown, and which are not far from each other. They're like neighboring kind of suburbs.
Yep.
And the ones in Yarraville, I had to add boxes to. They were ready already. They
Sure.
weren't making any queen cells yet, but there was lots of capped brood, and so they were about to go. We're
Yeah.
ready to expand. And then I went to Williamstown, and I was probably 2 weeks early for them.
Okay.
But I was glad that I had a look anyway. What I have noticed mainly though is because it's drier,
Yep.
there's not as much chalk brood as I've seen the last 3 years. So that's really good to see. Is
Yep.
it's drastically reduced the chalk brood that I'm seeing.
Okay.
And then I started on my hives over in Tarneet, and I've got 10 hives here, and I did 4 of them.
Yep.
And then I went, I don't need to do the rest. So
I see.
that definitely have not expanded as much. And I'll be doing some more later this week. But yeah, the weather's definitely, we're definitely getting days now that's warm enough. And
Sure.
I think yeah, I think that's, if your hive feels heavy and it's crowded at the front door, then get into it. The weather's warm enough, so why not? Yeah. So, because otherwise, I'm worried people are going to have swarms in their hives. So, yes. What has been happening? Why are you looking like that? What's been happening in your apiary?
Oh my gosh, Carmel. Slightly red-faced, but at the same time, I'm here for the greater learning opportunity for everybody. I've already had a hive in my own backyard swarm.
Wow, what? Really?
I don't know what day of the week it is right now. I'm not good with days of week.
Today's Wednesday.
Let's say last week, late last week. I was here at home, beautiful sunny day after a few cold days. I've been away all week, actually. In fact, I've been away for 2 weeks. So there be the challenge, is you come back from 2 weeks away and beautiful, lovely day. The next day was my day to go and check my bees.
You didn't get a chance.
Didn't get a chance. And it was a single brood box. There was only one box. There's probably lots for me to learn, and I reckon you might be able to help guide me through some of my thinking with that.
Yep.
But it swarmed. I caught it 3 meters from the parent hive, so that's nice and easy to manage. It was going to be split anyway at some point, so it's sort of job done.
Got the split for you, great.
But not how I expected it to occur. Anyway, that was amazing, and it was a really quite sizable swarm, to be honest. The other really cool thing, you've heard me bang on quite a few times now over a few months about these Slovenian AZ beehives.
Like the truck behind you on your yeah.
Ta-da!
Ta-da, yeah.
And I built one of
Yours isn't going to be that big though, is it?
I haven't built a truck, no. Next month I might show a picture of it, but it's I've set it up down there. I've built it. I just had to move the bees in. I don't know if anyone was like me. Yesterday was supposed to be a lovely warm day. It was quite warm, but it actually was windy and wet at the same time. So I didn't get to move those bees in. I was hoping to do that yesterday.
This Sunday will be great for it.
That's the day, Father's Day.
Yeah.
Let's make it happen. So I'll move it in, and I'm dying to report back on how that goes next month. On that, and I know you haven't seen it yet because I just know you haven't, but we recorded a session only a week or so ago about Slovenian AZ hives. It is on the Hive Buddy YouTube channel.
Right.
And if anyone wants to go and hear that conversation, and it was literally just a chat about them, like most of us in the room didn't know a lot about them. We were just starting to uncover and learn. Go and have a look. Definitely worth your time.
Can I circle back to your swarm for a minute?
Yes.
Was there any warning that they were going to do that.
What you said earlier about bees out the front, they were really busy the day before when I got home from being away, and I looked at them and I went, "Oh, I'm running out of time here." I'm still confused because I try and work back. Well, not confused. I work back the days to think about, well, what would it normally? I find there's a really obvious trigger day.
Yeah.
I've always noticed that. I've always gone, no wonder they're ready to swarm today, because 12 days ago, I remember that day it was 22 degrees or whatever it may have been.
Yeah, right.
Maybe it was because I wasn't around for 2 weeks and I didn't really notice the localized weather here.
Yeah.
But when I got back on that day, I went to them and I'm like, there's plenty of bees coming and going, but there's some mingling at the front door.
Yeah.
They're not leaving the front. They're still at the front door now.
And if you ever get bearding at the front door, if they're bearding because they're hot, they'll all be facing towards the door.
Yep.
Because their wings and everything and their fanning is helping to draw air out of the hive.
Yep.
But if they're bearding and they're ready to swarm, they'll be facing every which way.
Yep. Yeah, totally. That's a good
point.
So
that's the way to tell the difference between the bearding.
Yeah.
And I've also heard that bees will swarm closer to a full moon. So the lead up to a full moon and around a full moon.
Of course they would.
Yeah.
There's always something going
I've heard that said. So I'm actually wanting to monitor that this year to see if there's actually some truth to that.
Yeah, I wonder what the mechanism is.
Yeah.
Anyway, I don't necessarily know a whole lot of those sort of things, but yeah, that's crazy.
There you go.
Well, you should.
You've now got your split for your AZ hive.
Yeah, absolutely. All good. Let's see what comes of that. Hey, over to you now. Have you got something to dive into for us this month?
Well, you have been talking about swarms, so how about we dive into swarm prevention?
Oh my gosh, yes, please. It is topical. It always is.
It is topical, yes. So I just thought I might have a few bits and pieces to help people.
Yep.
So that they can get on top of swarming. So I'm actually going to share my screen.
Well, I'm probably a pretty good case study, aren't I?
You are okay. Let me see if there's anything in this that helps you out.
Yeah, good one.
Can you guys see that?
Yeah, that's looking good. We've got it.
Excellent. All right, let's start here. Swarming season. So the first thing to know is the bees plan weeks ahead of time.
Sure.
They know in their mind what they've decided, and they know what eggs have been laid. They know what's coming up much better than we do. The other thing to bear in mind is that a queen will lay anywhere between 1,500 and 3,000 eggs a day.
Yep.
And I would argue, because I've experienced it personally, maybe even more than 3,000 eggs a day.
Yeah, wow.
Not very often, but I have experienced that. And also bear in mind that one adult bee takes up the room of 3 baby bees. So let me just stop sharing. So when you've got 3 baby bees vertical in a cell,
yep,
one adult bee walking around will take up the space of those 3 circles.
So when they're inside the cell and they emerge, 3 cell spaces, it's like tripling the surface area, isn't it? Just when they
correct.
I'd never thought of it like that.
So 1 frame of capped brood becomes 3 frames worth of bees that need space to walk around in.
Heck, that's a really interesting perspective.
There you go. So going back to our little, what I'm going to share with you is what triggers swarming, what to look for, and what to do.
A bit late for this information.
Well, maybe you can pick up on the next one.
Yep.
So what triggers swarming? Basically, first of all, it's part of their natural cycle. From now until we get to summer solstice, which is the longest day of the year, they've got blinkers on and it's all about reproduction. So each bee is a living organism, but the hive itself is a super organism because
Yep.
it reproduces.
Yep.
So it's about making queens, making babies, expanding the hive,
Yep.
and making drones, and that whole reproductive process. So
Yep.
it naturally what they do anyway. And a hive won't swarm if it can't afford the resources.
Yep. Yep.
So it's a sign of abundance, which is a great thing. But yes, we do need to manage it. Other reasons that might trigger swarming is that you have an old queen,
Yep.
and so they are more likely to swarm than a younger queen. Overcrowding, whether they just don't have enough space.
Tipping that's an issue.
Yeah, like in your case, only one.
That's right.
Because you've probably had 3 frames of capped brood that became.
I suspect so.
Let's do the maths. So this is where you have to decide whether you want to run a single brood or a double brood.
Yep.
And if you're running a 10 frame hive, you don't really need a double brood. You can get away with not having a double brood. But if you're running an 8 frame hive, for me personally, I've always found if I just do it anyway, then I'm automatically helping to reduce that
Sure.
overcrowding.
Yep.
And the other issue, even if you do have a double brood, your queen might be honey bound. So they didn't use up the honey over winter that you left them, and they've had so much nectar coming in.
Yep.
That there's actually nowhere for the queen to lay because it's honey heavy.
Yep.
And so so there are things that you can do.
Right. So there's the other thing. There's the other thing. Yep.
Yeah. And the other thing that will trigger swarming, if you do have queen cells there already, is the queen, well, any cell, whether it's a worker, a queen, or a drone, they all get capped off. So the larvae, the egg hatches, the larvae grows, and then that larvae gets capped off on day 9.
Yes.
To start that transformation process. So the bees know if it's a nice, healthy, strong larvae, and especially if there's a couple of queen cells, so they've got backup, that hive sometimes can swarm on day 10.
Goes early. Yep.
Goes early.
Yep.
Yeah. So checking every 14 days, especially this time of year, is not necessarily going to work. So these are the different.
You could miss it altogether, can't you? Yeah.
You can. Yeah. I had a client who he was very, very religious on, he always wanted to do the right thing. And he rang me in a panic one day going, the bees are swarming. I just checked them 10 days ago. And I'm like, yep. It's day 10. Yeah.
Bad luck.
Yeah. What do you look for? So you can look for clues on the outside of the hive, and we've just discussed that with the bearding. So if it's all higgledy-piggledy and they're bearding and it's not a particularly warm day, then that can be a sign that they're about to swarm. So they can give you a bit of, but sometimes they don't. But it can be a clue. Sometimes you can have scout bees. And I need to learn more about scout bees, but there's a certain behavior of scout bees, and they don't do robbing behavior when they go into a cavity or whatever. Oh, that's right. I remember what it is. So scout bees, when they go into a cavity, whether it be a bait hive or a compost bin or whatever, when they come out again, they'll do an orientation flight.
Yep.
Well,
so I'm delighted you're talking about this, because one of my points of interest later is to talk about this further. So this is good.
Right.
Good
So
segue.
They'll be facing the hive, and they will do that infinity kind of sign as they go out, because they want to remember where it is, if it's a suitable place. So,
perfect.
Are you talking about scout bees later on?
I've got a thing here that is
awesome.
3 simple ways to recognise a honeybee scout.
Awesome.
Not joking.
Sorry, I didn't mean to steal your thunder.
No, perfect.
So if you've got scout bees around your yard, then that's a sure sign that you've got swarming coming. If the front door is really crowded, as well. Not a
Yep.
beard that's hanging, but it's just there's a lot of bees and they're having trouble fitting through the front door.
Yeah.
Then you know that it's overcrowded. So these are signs before you've even got into the hive.
Yeah.
These are signs that you need to get in and check it, and that there could be swarming that's going to start soon.
Yep.
Also hefting your hive, that weight
Yes.
of the hive, I think that's a really important. It's really simple, but it can give you so much information if you do it regularly.
Yep.
Once you're inside the hive, obviously you're looking for are there queen cells or queen cups. If there's an open queen cell, does it have an egg in it yet or not? And again, this will, if you know your maths and you know your days, this will help you.
Yep.
And you can get it at Beck's Bees. I don't know where else you can get it, but and I don't know where mine is. There's a dial.
There is.
Yeah, and you can spin the dial. So whatever day of the month it's on, you can spin the dial around and put the egg there, or we're at whatever stage, and then it will tell you when the queen's likely to hatch.
Yeah.
So that can be a useful tool. Inside the hive, are there queen cells? Does the hive look crowded? Yes, there it is behind you. Yep. That thing right there. Yes.
Yep. The wheel. Yep. The wheel of queen.
The queen
existence.
Yeah, queen rearing. Yeah, it's really good. Is when you take the lid off, are the bees just exploding out of the hive when you do that? Because remember, at any one time during the day, there's at least 1/3 of the family out foraging.
Sure, it's a lot.
So if you take the lid off and they're exploding out of the hive, and
yep.
at least a third of the family's not even there.
Yep.
How are they all going to fit inside? So, you need to think ahead. Is it honey bound? Is there too much honey? Are there full frames of honey? Can you do something to bring the honey up, to make more space inside?
I would think that given it's been obviously warmer, but not warm, if you're smelling honey from a distance from your hive at the moment, I think that's a good external indicator that there's a lot going on in there.
Yes. Well, smelling honey is the evaporation process, and they do that when there's lots of nectar coming in. So if you're smelling honey, then there's a nectar flow on.
And on the Mornington Peninsula, we've got amazing eucalypts in flower at the moment, and coastal banksias. I reckon it is on at the moment.
And what's my saying? When the nectar flows, the hive grows.
Hey, look at you.
When the nectar flows, the hive grows. And now until summer solstice, they are growing in babies.
Exactly what they want to do, isn't it?
They want to get as big as possible so that once they're at capacity, they can bring in all of that honey and food for winter time.
Yep.
So, yeah. So
hey, can I ask an opinion?
Yep.
If I was to have come home that other day and gone, ooh, lots going on there. If I was to suit up, maybe not even smoke up necessarily, because it's just a quick action I'm going to mention now. If I was to lift the lid, put a box on with frames, and put the lid on just to buy me a few days. I mean, the awkward thing is it can just get cold all of a sudden, and that extra space can be a drama. Do you think you buy yourself any time?
Depends on what stage the queen cell's at.
And I'm thinking maybe it buys you a day or two. I don't think it's going to necessarily change the whole cycle.
Yeah, well, you're right, because once the bees have made up their mind, they've made up their mind quite often. Yeah. If you've got a young queen, and if the queen cell was at an early stage, they may have gone, oh, okay, we've got more space, and we'll terminate that because she's a young queen and we can wait a little bit now. But if the queen cell's already capped, then
get ready.
Then get ready. Yeah. So, and the other thing is, if you put on a box of foundation, those frames of foundation are useless to them until it's been drawn out and built into comb.
Yep, I need to do something.
So I know that there are some beekeepers that get into the habit of keeping a few really nice stickies over winter time, or they've put them back on the hive at autumn time so the bees can clean them out, so they're not sticky stickies.
Yep.
But they've got already drawn out comb.
Yep.
Because you can put that down into the brood box and the queen can lay in it immediately.
Yep. Of course.
And I'll show you a graphic very soon.
Oh yeah.
And you'll see why she needs room to lay.
Ooh,
so what was I going to say? Oh, and I already mentioned it. Another sign that they could be wanting to swarm is to be aware how many frames of capped brood there are, because one adult bee takes up the room of where 3 baby bees are. So if you've got these frames of capped brood that are ready to hatch, expansion's about to take place. And the bees know that. They know what their timeline is.
Yep.
So they're preparing in advance for that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep. That makes sense.
So what triggers swarming, what to look for, what can we do about it? What we do about it is room in the brood box. So yeah, move honey up. And this is where, if you're a flow hive user, I don't care. I put normal frames up in the flow hive area all the time anyway. And even as here in Victoria, as I've said before, I run a double brood with the flow box. So I have a three box flow. Because you're wanting to cycle old frames out anyway.
Sure.
And if you're going to move honey up, great. If you want to move capped brood up, you can do that too, to put, especially if there is a big nectar flow on, they will draw them out quite quickly. They can draw out frames overnight if they really want to, but they need a good, strong nectar flow. Yeah, so I put capped brood up. Rather than, so I'd put honey up, I leave pollen down, I can put capped brood up.
I suppose capped brood doesn't require the same heating effort as uncapped brood.
Yeah, but yes, no, not really. But
we've got to be careful about that, don't we?
The other issue is that, and I've, again, from personal experience, if you put brood up that has eggs or very young larvae and the nurse bees are on that, they can't smell the queen anymore because she's not in their area. They're above the queen excluder, and they all make emergency cells because they think they've lost their queen.
Yeah, right on. Especially, and I suppose if you've got 3 boxes to deal with, that's a fair bit.
Yeah, and I've had that happen before where I had a queen right hive. I'd seen her, she was there, and I put up a frame that had too many eggs on it, and they made queen cells. Because they thought, so what else can we do? So move honey up, add drawn comb down into the brood area if possible. One other way to this is about swarm prevention now, so add boxes as well if you need to. If you want to, remove queen cells or queen cups, but before you do that, always look for eggs first. Because they might need that queen cell. So
there might be a good purpose behind it. Hey.
Yeah, there might be a good purpose. Yeah, so always look for eggs first. But especially if you've got a nice young queen, and you really don't want to have, and maybe you're new. That's what I did for the first 2 years of beekeeping. The thought of doing a split was way beyond my mental capabilities at that time.
Yeah.
And when I was just starting off, I just simply kept getting rid of the queen cells or the queen cups. I would get rid of them before they could even turn into anything. Because I didn't want to deal with a swarm, and I was a split at that stage was way beyond what I was at in my learning. So that's what I used to do. Another thing, if you know that your queen is getting older and they're starting to make queen cells, pinch off the old queen, help her on her journey a little bit quicker, and then you can make use of those queen cells. Because once the old queen's gone, then they'll go, oh, well, we need that queen cell to replace the queen anyway.
You need it.
The only thing is, if there's about 8 or more, like if there's lots of queen cells, I would reduce it down to maybe 2 or 3 and try and have them all on the same frame.
Yep.
Sure. Yeah, because then you'll stop that secondary swarming. So if you have too many queens hatching and they're hatching in different parts of the hive and they don't find each other, because they often have a battle to see who's going to take over the hive. But what sometimes, especially if there's too many bees in the hive, one queen will stay. So you've gotten the first swarm's gone, the first old queen's gone, and then you have multiple queens hatch. You'll then get a secondary swarm from that as well. And so you've lost numbers and then you lose numbers again.
I get you.
Yeah, so make a split. Now, in a split, this is really basic. I'm not going to go into huge detail, but you want some honey, some pollen, some babies from eggs right through to capped brood.
The whole transition,
A whole transition and a whole lot of bees. Ideally, you want, the best scenario is in nature, the old queen leaves. So if you're making a split, if you can take the old queen with you into the split and leave the queen cells into the original mother hive, that is going to feel most natural for the bees.
It's essentially an artificial swarm.
Yes, exactly. But you've given that queen,
managed it,
some food sources and some babies already. When you do that, the more nurse bees that you can take with the queen, they're not going to fly back to the old hive, so then she won't lose too many numbers.
So don't shake them off.
No, especially if you're doing a split, and ideally, if you do a split, you should take it at least more than 3 kilometers away, 5 kilometers away. But not everyone can do that. Sometimes you have to leave the split in your yard.
So this is realizing that the foraging bees will go back to the original location, even if you only put it 2 meters apart or a meter apart, they'll still fly back here. So it's going, hey, in knowing that I'm putting this many frames of eggs, larvae, pupae over here, I need to make sure they all go with nurse bees. So don't shake any off. Take the bees, the adults, across with them.
As many as possible.
As many as you can, knowing full well. In fact, I could imagine a scenario where if it felt logical, you could shake some more nurse bees into that split from the other hive, knowing that a lot of the foragers are going back to the original location.
Correct. And so if you don't see a lot of foragers coming out of the nuke for the first few days, because you've got nurse bees in there, they're not going to be flying.
Totally logical.
As long as they've got enough food on board, they'll be okay, because they're going to grow up and grow older.
It's an act in resource management, isn't it?
Yes. The other alternative is that you put the nuke where the original mother hive was, if it's not to move, and actually you can move the mother hive and rotate it 180 degrees. And then you can have them right next to each other. And so if the nuke goes where the mother hive was, all those foragers are going to come back and they're actually going to boost the numbers in the nuke. So that's also another scenario that you can do.
Cool.
So you just have to be mindful of that, because often people do a split and then the split fails because the numbers drop too much.
So I've always thought it, and you've sort of confirmed it for me, it all just comes down to having a fair understanding of the biology and the behaviour of bees. And then you realise there's actually lots of ways to do it. And there's lots of ways, some will be better than others. But if you don't have the perfect scenario, but you're acknowledging this biology of the bee and the way that they're going to behave when you put a scenario to them, then you can give them the best possible outcome because of that.
Correct.
Whereas if you're, and then the opposite to that is if you're flying along with your bees and don't really understand the biology and are quickly trying something because you've seen it on YouTube or heard about it or someone told you to do a thing, you don't understand that biology piece, you can get tripped up quite easily and think you're doing the right thing and realising, well, in hindsight, I was completely wrong with the biology and the behaviour of the bee. Interesting.
So this is where we can use the different stages of bees
Yeah.
to our advantage because we know what they're doing.
Totally.
Now, if all else fails, and it has happened sometimes, you've done your hive check, you've either gotten rid of the queen cells that you don't think they're going to swarm, but for whatever reason you've missed a queen cell. The other thing you can do is put out a lure box.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Put out a hive somewhere, like a nuke somewhere with just a couple of frames in it. Here in Victoria, they don't, and again, and it's because of the spread of AFB, you're not supposed to put frames that are already drawn out into a lure box, because what happens is when a hive has swarmed, before they swarm, they fill up chockers full with nectar in their honey crops.
Yeah.
So when they get to their destination, they're ready to build wax.
Sure.
Because they can't store food or pollen or lay eggs until the comb is built. So they've taken lots of honey on board, ready to build wax. If you provide them with a frame that's already drawn out, they don't build that wax. They dump the honey into those cells. And if they have AFB, and then they dump that honey into the cells, and then they start feeding it to the babies, that can trigger, because it doesn't affect the adults, it affects the babies.
Sure.
But if they've eaten it themselves and they consume that for their own energy to build wax, then so that's the thinking behind it. And that's why, in our rules, you're not supposed to put drawn comb into a swarm, into a lure box. So there you go.
Good tips.
Hopefully, so make sure they've got room in the brood box. Remove any queen cells if you want to. Look for eggs first. Or pinch off the old queen and use the queen cells. Do a split and provide yourself with a lure box.
Cool.
Now, I also want to share something else with you, because we need to be mindful of how quickly things can expand and why I think a double brood is better than a single brood.
Oh, I felt that. That felt like that was right at me. I felt it.
Well, no, not you. Just in general. Just in general. Right. So, as I said before, a queen can lay 1,500 to 3,000 eggs a day.
Sure.
So,
is this going to be a maths lesson?
Yeah. Let's start with 1,500 eggs a day.
Sure.
So, one deep frame actually has 6,900 cells on it. Now, we all know that there's always a bit of honey and stuff around.
Other stuff happening.
Right. Okay. So let's say we've got 6,000 cells to lay eggs in.
It's also great for your maths. I can see what's coming there.
Yeah. Now, this is my, highfalutin scenario. So I've got an 8-frame hive.
Sure.
This is a single brood box.
Yep.
This queen is laying 1,500 eggs a day. So in 2 days, she will fill up one side of that frame.
Yep. So 3,000 eggs down.
Another 2 days, she'll fill up the other side. So 3,000 on one side, 3,000 on the other side.
Yep.
Right? So it's going to take her 4 days
to fill one frame.
Fill up a frame.
Gotcha. Yeah, that makes sense.
Once that frame's full, we have to get to day, and it's not day 20, it's day 21. So it's down here.
Yep.
That frame is kind of occupied all of that time. So
it has, yep.
Yep. So then she moves to the next frame, and then she moves to the next frame, and then she moves to the next frame, and then she moves to the next frame.
Yep.
By the time she gets to the last frame, so because on the end, obviously we've got honey and pollen.
Yep.
And sometimes we don't. Sometimes we have honey, and then pollen.
Yep.
So but in this scenario, by the time she gets to that frame, she's filled up that frame. This first frame is now empty again, and she can start laying in it again.
But that's not leaving much spare space, is it?
No, and remember, these are full frames, and the brood cluster tends to be a ball, so the frames on the outside have more honey, or more pollen, and less brood in it.
Yep.
Right? So yeah, so that's 1,500. So you can see what, and that this would get full pretty quickly.
Yeah, and that's exactly where I would have been at inside my hives with being that
And
single box.
and this is 21 days for workers. We've also got drones coming along at the moment, and they
Yep.
take 24 days to hatch.
Yeah, of course.
And I haven't included them in this scenario.
Yep.
All right, let's go to 2,000 eggs a day.
Haha.
So we've got our 8 frames again. We've got our honey on one side and our pollen on the other wall.
Yep.
So 2,000 eggs a day. So 2 3s are 6. So it's going to take her 3 days to completely fill both sides of that frame.
So we're down to 3 days instead of 4 days now.
Correct, right?
Yep. Yep.
So frame 1 is full. It's going to not be available for the next 21 to 23 days.
Sure.
And then they got to clean them out. I don't know how long that takes. So the problem here lies, so we've got that frame, that frame, that frame, that frame. By the time she's filled up this frame, by the time she's filled up this frame, the next day she wants to start this frame. She wants to go back again, but they're in the process of hatching. So that frame is not really available yet.
So you get to a point where space availability all of a sudden crashes because there is none.
Yeah.
And the hatching continues, and she wants to go faster than the hatching will allow.
Correct. Yeah. And especially if when the nectar's flowing, that stimulates the queen to lay lots.
Yep.
Lots and lots and lots. So let's go to our last scenario. And I had a hive once that it had a double brood, and she was laying on all 16 frames, and they were putting pollen above the queen excluder.
Sure.
And there was a couple of the frames were complete brood. There was 6,900 cells.
Yep.
And they were full of brood. And a couple of them had like a little bit of honey in the corners, but it was basically she was laying from wall to wall, like right on the outside wall, and it was an incredible. So I reckon that particular queen was laying more than 3,000 eggs a day, and that year it was 2018. I'll never forget it. And I think I lost my phone. I don't think I've got the photos anymore. I did 4.5 splits on that hive just to try and slow it down.
Yep.
Right. So let's look at 3,000 eggs a day. And in this scenario, I've got a double brood. So
sure.
This is my first box here. And then this black line, this indicates, so this is frame 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, and you'd have 15, 16 frames.
Yeah.
All right. Yep. So in this scenario, if she's laying 3,000 eggs a day, she fills up a whole frame, both sides, in 2 days.
Yep. Yep.
So that's full. 2 days later, 2 days later, 2 days later. So by the time we get to day 12,
still only halfway through the process for that box.
We've still got, yeah, exactly. Where I feel like, where the fuck is she gonna lay? Where is she gonna lay?
She's stressing out now. She's backing up.
If we had a young queen, she's year 1 or year 2.
Yep.
And she's an Italian, because they're sprinters. They lay so much in the first 2 years, and then they drop off completely, right?
Yeah. Yep.
If you're running a single brood box, where is she going to lay?
Yep.
So this is why, this is why I like to run a double brood. So on day, where are we? On day 14, she can go to another frame.
Yep.
Day 15, another frame. Day 16, another frame. Day 18, day 20.
Yep.
Day 22. This is where the hatching starts, around here.
Oh yeah, from the frame above, frame 2 at the top. Yeah, I see what you mean.
Yeah. From frame 2 at the top, this is where the hatching starts.
But at the same time, there's still not a lot of space there. There's only a few days of space she's got. She couldn't be going any harder, could she?
No, but she's got this spare frame here.
Yeah,
When that
yep,
starts hatching, like when this one lot starts hatching,
yep.
she's still got this spare frame to lay in.
Oh, it's tight though.
So this is, yeah, these are, yeah, but this is a
Hyper performing female.
I
queen.
think generally speaking, you're looking at around this kind of scenario.
Yep.
And if you've got this and a double brood, I think that's nice and comfortable.
I like this. I can imagine a beautiful graphic, some fancy graphic that explains this neatly would help a lot of people. I like what you've done here because it certainly tidied my thinking up.
Yeah. Well, it helps you to understand that the queen needs space to lay in. We need to provide that for her. Yeah.
Yeah, well, there you go. Well, hopefully that's helped some
Well,
of our
because
people.
if we don't, they're going to swarm. Well, they probably want to swarm anyway because it's, but on the other end of the season, like when we get to February, March, and they are getting ready for winter, but the same thing, if you have too much honey in there and there's not space for her to lay and there's a really good nectar flow on, you can still get late swarming because of that. So there you go.
Well, thank you, because that's some priceless information.
You're
hoping
welcome.
those that are looking in and paying attention see the value in that, because that can save swarming, I should say. It can save time and effort.
Yep.
It can probably save
I think it helps.
honey.
It helps people to understand it. This is why I bang on about it. You check your hives, mate, and and I know sometimes, especially if you work during the week and you've only got the weekend, you can't wait. The bees are not going to wait for Father's Day. The bees are not going to wait for the grand final. Like, that means nothing to them. Even if it's 15 degrees and it's a little bit like, you don't, take the honey box off and go straight into where you need to have a look. Right now it's swarming season, so you're looking at queen cells. And if you have a quick look for the queen, shake the bees off so you can see all those cells clearly. Well,
lovely comment there from Svetlana, complimenting you on the graphic.
Oh, look, I'm a visual learner too, so it just helps you to really understand.
Well, very valuable learning once again, Carmel. Thank you for sharing that one.
Pleasure.
Good job. Well, I'm going to tell you about tonight's second show sponsor, which is Anna's online mentorship program, Carmel. Nice. I know that some of the people that are dialed into this tonight definitely know Anna and are part of her session right now. But those that haven't met Anna, she's a very accomplished beekeeper and botanist.
I love all the stuff she does about plants. It's fantastic.
She's amazing, and she provides amazing guidance and expertise to help address the individuals that form her mentorship group. Her program spans 7 sessions, and it starts next week on Monday night. Have I got that right, Svetlana? Monday night, Tuesday night, Monday night. I'll double check that in a minute. How I think about it is, if some people are wanting to sort of unlock their full potential of their beekeeping passion, then Anna's guidance is absolutely wonderful for that. So whether you're a beginner thinking, I don't know what's going on, or someone who's got quite good skills and are looking to refine those, her mentorship group is absolutely going to suit different people, different levels of expertise. In fact, it helps grow the group together. As I said earlier, visit hivebuddy.com.au to learn more, but get in quick because the show starts next week. Not that it actually can't mean you join after that, but why not get the benefit from right at the beginning?
Well, I do remember, I love when I was doing the mentoring group, is that often someone was having an issue and someone else in the group had gone through that. And so the group learning together was fantastic. And it was great that, I could check in with each person individually, and it's like, okay, what's going on in your hive? What's going on in your hive? And then we could learn something together as well as a group about, what's in flower or splits, or, it was so nice to be able to offer that support every single fortnight, in line with the checks that you're doing and, you know, taking
well,
holding your hand through
you
the
end up
season.
going from learning about your 2 to 3 beehives or whatever you've got, from learning across 15 to 20 beehives that the whole group looks after.
Yeah, and you might have a top bar and a flow and a regular,
lots going on.
You know, yeah.
Do you want to hear some wacky? Well, not all of these are wacky. Some of these, I've just got a few things to share with you for the evening. You up for a few more?
Well, you mentioned scout bees before because we're onto swarming.
Yeah, exactly. So 2 of my 3 articles that I wish to share with you, for all 3, maybe all 3 are. 3 out of 3 of these articles are from a website that I want to draw your attention to, Carmel, if you don't know. It's called Honeybee Suite, honeybeesweet.com. I'll share it on Hive Buddy later.
I do know Honeybee Suite. That's great.
I love it. Rusty is the author of all the articles over there, and she's been at it for years. So it brings me pleasure to share with you a few of her. And you get a no BS version of things from her. And she doesn't know. She doesn't try and pretend. So I'm going to share a few of those quickly with you now that I think are topical. So first one, 3 simple ways to recognise a honeybee scout.
Yes.
Swarming
and scouts. Go.
Yeah. So firstly, she goes and talks about 2 groups that make up the foraging workforce of the honeybee colony. There's the scouts and the recruits. So scout bees are those that are going out there in the world searching for what the colony needs.
So that might be water or nectar or pollen or...
Spot on. So it can be any of those. So once they discover what they think is a valid resource for the hive, they'll obviously go back and report on that and tell them how great it is.
They're the ones that do the waggle dance.
They are very much involved in that process. Yeah, you've got to be on the planet a little while to be to qualify to be good on the dance floor.
Yeah.
So you've nailed it. They're most often looking for nectar and pollen, but they do, that's like their primary activity. But not just that, they're out there looking for water. They're looking for plant resins to make propolis. And as you spoke of earlier, other places to live. So if they want to swarm and go somewhere else, they're out there for that as well. And also they sometimes like to communicate to the hive on other hives that are worth going and robbing. And we've all probably experienced robbing before. So that's another thing they'll go out and scout for. They'll go, hey, here's the thing we need. Look at all this honey. And that'll relate nicely to another article I'm going to share in a minute. But how do scouts and recruits sort of differ? So firstly, they need really good flyers. So these are bees that have normally been around for a while and probably, to be honest, getting to the end of their life.
Yeah.
So older, highly experienced foragers that know their area. Makes sense, doesn't it? These scouts search for these new resources and they'll be behaving in quite a different way to what they normally do. So whereas if they're going to actually get nectar to produce honey or pollen to bring back to the hive, it's normally a really quick flight, collect, return. Whereas these scouts are normally out there moving around almost like you go, that's a lazy looking bee. What's it doing? Why is it seems a bit sluggish. It doesn't seem like it. Yeah, but it's absolutely doing something different. And it's doing something different for a valid reason. It needs to find resources for the hive. So it's taking its time. And I like that because so often in that beekeeping world, everything seems to be happening quickly. No, they're taking their time because they need to find what it is that they need next. So I've probably already sort of given away some of the signs of the scout. So the behaviour is really what it comes down to, because we know visually there's probably not much difference. Well, there is no difference. A bee's a bit older, it's probably a bit more battered, but the behaviour is the key. So the way that Rusty describes it is the bee looks like they're lost. Isn't that funny?
Where am I?
So they'll fly back and forth across the ground. Maybe they'll never land. And if they do land, they might stay. They might do so briefly. They might have a sip of nectar. They might just see what's going on and then move on from that. But they don't load up on nectar. They don't load up on other resources. They just go to test. You talked earlier about scouts looking in like hollows or in nest boxes.
Yeah.
They'll absolutely do that. They'll go there. They'll look slowly. They'll take their time and they'll spend time inside that hollow.
Yeah.
It's not a quick act. They'll go in there and they'll be looking to understand the size, any threats or issues, the openings, everything about that to give it the impression of whether it's a good, valid, potential another home. So if you see them moving slowly and deliberately and not in a hurry back and forth, you know you've probably found a scout bee. There's a bit of a talk in here that if it's a bee that ends up flying into another hive and going, oh, this hive looks like it's worth robbing, they've probably just caught the scent of the honey that's in there, and that's got them there. And then on a weakened hive, it's just easy for them to get in there and have a look around, and they won't be particularly noticed. So again, you're not going to probably pick it on inside a hive, another hive, that there's a bee from another hive. That's not probably very likely, but their relaxed, casual, slow, lazy nature is what gives it away.
Yeah, right.
So there's something to think about. I like that article because I've thought about, I can identify seeing these sort of bees almost every day I'm out there in my yard. So I thought that was a worthy share. The other one that I've got here, sticking with the number 3s, is there's 3 surprising things that honeybees never collect, or almost never collect is the title to her article.
Okay.
Can you guess any? 3 things that they never collect? Can you guess? What do you think that might be coming? There's 3 things that happen inside their hive that they don't collect.
They don't collect.
One of them is so obvious it's ridiculous, but we often overlook it anyway. They don't collect honey.
They don't collect honey. They make honey.
They make honey, and obviously that's what the nectar is. And most beekeepers know that. Like, we know that.
Yeah.
But it's so easily overlooked by people who don't understand that. It's just not necessarily always something that's too obvious. So obviously, to make the honey, they use their salivary enzymes with the nectar and removing the excess water, and they can create honey. Yeah. There's one exception to this, though. Yeah. When they rob from other beehives, they're directly collecting honey. Yeah, so there is that one exception, and that's why in her title she's made it quite clear that it's almost never collect. And I like that. I thought that was good. Yeah. She's made a note here about that, saying there's a bit of confusion over over honeybees, and honey originated the name of honeybees being Apis mellifera. Yeah. Translates to honey carrying bee. Oh, but based off what we just spoke about, that's not really that accurate, is it?
No, it's a nectar carrying bee and a pollen carrying bee.
Or the suggestion here is maybe it should have been changed to Apis mellifica, which means honey making bee. Ah. So number 2 on the list here is bees. The second thing that bees don't collect is propolis. We've talked about propolis fair bit in last month's episode.
They make it. They don't collect it, they make it.
Yeah, so they collect plant resins from trees and sticky flower buds and the like, and they store this gummy. I've always wondered how they bring that back. I mean, the logic was pollen baskets on their legs, and that's exactly what they do. They bring it back just like that. And then when they get them back, they work the resins with their mandibles, adding enzymes and saliva and all those lovely hygienic sounding actions to make propolis. Yeah, it's not...
It's actually really good for us.
Exceptionally good, because they also know how to pick the best properties from resins, which are antibacterial for the tree and therefore antibacterial for the bees. Yeah. So they know. Just so clever. And the third item from a beehive that honeybees almost never collect, and I don't know if they would ever collect this, is bee bread.
No, again, they're cooking. They make it. They're great chemists, aren't they?
They really know and understand and
the properties utilize. They're mind blown.
I don't know when in my beekeeping journey I switched on to the idea of bee bread, because I don't think it was in my first season I realised that was a thing. I just thought, oh, there's more pollen, and that was sort of the end of that in my mind. Yep. But for those that are fairly new to this and figuring it out still, you've probably seen it, even if you don't know if you have. But bee bread is manufactured from pollen mixed with honey, nectar, bee enzymes, and all sorts of things. And the reason, and it ferments, and it actually looks after it. And again, because there's all these wonderful products, it is well preserved, and it's capped over nicely with honey. That's why it looks a bit sticky and glistens, because we all know how well honey is good for preservation.
That's how you can tell. Pollen is matte in colour. Yep. And bee bread is shiny and glistening. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
And it comes down to the simple fact that bee bread stores much better than plain pollen on its own.
Yeah.
The nutrients end up lasting months rather than just days.
Yeah. And it breaks down the protein back into amino acids so the baby can digest it better.
How cool is that?
Amazing. So they gather all these raw materials and then they transform them.
Yep.
Yeah.
I've got 2 more minutes that I need. Is that all right?
Sure. Yeah.
My third
I could
article.
listen to you all night, you know that.
Oh, stop it. Third article, again from Honeybee Suite. I've got to keep acknowledging that because Rusty does amazing articles. Do honeybees move eggs from cell to cell?
I've heard that they do, but I've never tell me because I'm really fascinated by this.
Well, I'm going to let you down a little bit in my answer to some degree, but we've all sort of known that ants can. We've seen ants been picking up eggs and moving them around. And you go, well, could there be an association here where the same things happen? So there's a little bit of that thinking, and it's probably not unreasonable to think that they could do that. But there's a few things that textbooks and research papers sort of give us some clues about this sort of behaviour. I'll get to them now. So firstly, it is known that honeybees will reduce the number of eggs in a nest if the queen has produced more than the workers can care for. So too many eggs, they'll manage that and go, well, we've got too many, we need to do something. They'll reabsorb them, which is essentially eat them. So while honeybees are typically honey consumers, they can consume their own if they need to, because they're not the sort of creatures to waste. They won't waste it. So that's the first point. The second point is, in a healthy queen right colony, there's always a background level of laying workers. I didn't know this, by the way. Like, that was new to me. And that's them just staying capable and available to lay eggs should the colony go into a situation.
Yeah, and well, I know somebody, what was it, 1 in 10,000 bees or something. Somebody actually went through a hive, went through a whole lot of workers and actually found out the ratio.
Wouldn't that be a thrilling task?
1 in 1,000, or I don't know what the ratio is, but somebody actually did that research. Yeah.
Well, when that happens,
and normally her pheromones stop them from doing it, don't they? Yeah.
Can be that, yeah. And what tends to happen is the other workers, normally by noticing the pheromones, go to those eggs and go, well, we don't need these eggs, and they'll consume them or remove them from the hive. So the thought of them picking them up and moving them around suggests that it is absolutely possible that bees could move eggs. You know, they've got good mandibles that can grab onto stuff, so why wouldn't they be able to? So with that thought in mind, it seems fairly obvious that perhaps they could move it, but there's just not a lot of proof that they do.
So no one's actually noticed whether they do.
That's the thing. And I love the last little thought she's got here. So she says honeybees are survivors. You can almost imagine them conspiring amongst themselves and saying, we need an egg in this queen cup. Let's bring one in from over there. No one will know.
Yeah, we're going to bop the queen off. Let's build a cell like out near the pollen somewhere, and we'll move an egg into it, and then she won't know. Yeah.
I reckon if ever you come across this scenario, there's not a lot of knowledge out there. There's not a lot of proof or facts. So by all means, share it if you find it. And Carmel, my last.
Would you even find out that would be, yeah.
We're about to finish this session, but I can't finish this session without reading you one last article. And I'm only this is top level journalism by The Guardian.
Top level, okay.
Absolutely right up there. It was only produced earlier this month. I'm not going to get into the details because I think you'll get the picture by me reading the title.
Okay.
Ripped, hot, and in your 50s. You are now officially beekeeping age. I told you I find something every month that's
I'm in my 50s and I'm pretty hot, but I have a 1-pack, not a 6-pack.
There you go, and that's the last thing I've
got. Oh my goodness, who wrote that?
let's not go into that. Let's not embarrass Zoe Williams from The Guardian about what she wrote on the 10th of August. The actual
Where do you find this stuff?
the article's actually trash. It's not worth it, but I thought the title can give us a chuckle, and that's
It's
the
kind
aim
of
of the
true
wrap
though.
up.
Yep.
Hey, we've got to the end. I just want to thank everyone for coming along and being part of it. Before you do go, there's the Tuesday the 26th of September is currently our date for our next catch-up, our next one of these. So I hope to see lots of people coming along. You can, of course, always catch the recording on the YouTube channel a little bit later or shared on Hive Buddy in our Hive Buddy space. That'll be there as well. I did mention to you briefly over the night about Anna's mentorship session and also the online the Bee Club's online program that's available to organise your bee club. Visit hivebuddy.com.au for that. But Carmel, it's been an absolute pleasure, as it always is. Thank you very much for being here.
Well, thank you for starting off the swarm season and giving me a good opportunity to talk about it.
I feel like I had the first one in all of Melbourne, can I say?
Yes. Yep.
That's not a trophy. Started. I'm not carrying that as a trophy, by the way. I don't quite feel like that. But let's leave it at that. It's been absolutely wonderful. Thanks, everybody. Take care.
Thanks, everyone.
Night, night.